Oh, hey there. Hey, my name is Sean Francis Coleman with PerspectVe LLC, and I want to talk with you a bit about well-being, okay? Particularly the 8 bodies of well-being. All right. Now, there's more than 8 bodies within the idea of well-being. Traditionally, most people only address and acknowledge 4 of them, which is the physical body, the only body that we can see, the mental body. Mental body is the connection that you have with your thought world. Your emotional body, which is your connection with your emotions, and then your spiritual body. And the spiritual body is really your connection with the multiverse, right? Those are the 4 that most people will acknowledge in text and literature, just in everyday conversation. But at PerspectVe LLC, we include 4 more. Your environmental body, which is pretty much any environment that you're in. Your home, your apartment, your job, your community, your city, your state. It can even be an atmosphere, right? So it doesn't necessarily always have to be, we're always in some type of physical space, but even if you're outside and you're around, it can be beautiful outside, but if you're around toxic people, the atmosphere can begin to be very unhealthy. So that is also an environment. It's more existential in that way. We also have the occupational body, right? The occupational body is pretty much your job, career, or your purpose in life. I like what Osho says about this, in the sense that your life or happiness happens when you fit with your life, right? There's no disrespect to anybody who has a job or a career. I particularly believe that when you start to really hit like a magic divine flow in life is whenever you connect with your purpose in life, right? That's really where a lot of your well-being can start to really be increased, all right? You also have your financial body, right? Obviously that relates to finances. I believe it was Bro Polite who said that, it's hard to have spiritual freedom if you cannot have financial freedom. So, it's very difficult to focus on some of your everyday needs and things like that whenever your mind is always worried about paying the rent, paying the mortgage, paying various bills, okay? And then you have the social body, and the social body is obviously your connection to your to the people around you, right? Friends, family. Now, most people would say that your social body is based on like your interpersonal life, your interpersonal skills. In the book that I have that is pretty much a more in-depth perspective and a more in-depth piece of work regarding the 8 bodies of well-being, I actually say that your social body is really based off of more intrapersonal skills, right? So the things within yourself and how you deal with your internal world and how that affects how you deal with your external world whenever it comes to your social environment. All right, many different ways that we can make conversations about this. Again, this is a mini training, so I'm going to try to be brief, but I want to be as clear as possible. Okay. Now you see here that the 8 bodies are in unison. All right. Dr. Umar Johnson always says that you can achieve self-actualization whenever your bodies are aligned, right? And I've seen working with people that unfortunately most people live out of unison. This is how most people look. Their bodies are all out of unison, discombobulated. You can be really intelligent. You can even have a lot of money, but if you're not paying attention to other bodies within your well-being, what happens is that stress and symptoms start to come to the surface. So most people go to the doctor, or they go to a therapist, or they go to a psychiatrist, or a holistic doctor, or a pharmacist, and they're trying to get the symptom to go away. Now, sometimes that is appropriate, but in actuality, if we look at it from a well-being, especially a depth-oriented well-being perspective, the symptom is not always there to try to haunt you or try to hurt you, right? Sometimes the symptom is there to try to help you, right? So the symptoms that come to the surface are really saying, hey, you're not taking care of me very well like you are these other bodies, so in order to get your attention and get my needs met, I have to tell you, I have to maybe stress you out, I have to give you anxiety attacks, I have to give you racing thoughts, right? I have to give you pain in your neck, I have to give you suicidal thoughts or homicidal thoughts or all of these things, right? And people think that that is the problem whenever it is problematic, but it's not necessarily the root problem. And from my perspective, and even if if you read a lot of text, it'll empirically either directly or allude to the idea that what happens is that when you're not nurturing one of your bodies, pretty much like I said, the body will start to try to get your attention through sending you some form of stress, right? It can even happen with your financial body. If your financial body is not intact, well, you may get, unexpected bills, that you are, having problem paying. All of these things are very, very, very connected. I look at these, the example I use is like Octomom and Octodad, right? If they have 8 babies and they're only feeding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, and they're not feeding the other 3, well, that's neglect. That's neglect. The other babies are going to start to cry to get mom and dad's attention so that they can get fed and nurtured just like the other babies are, right? Very important that you understand that. No one of these bodies is more important than the other. The mental body sometimes tries to make you believe that it's the most important because the mental body is a bully a lot of the time, And I remember DMX's rap line where he said, he said, how can I maintain with madness on my brain? I resort to violence. I always am very fascinated with that line because he's saying because I'm having this issue with my mental body, it is now becoming physical and I'm becoming violent. And maybe not even violent to other people. Maybe you're violent to yourself. So you see how these bodies are very, very connected. If your mental body's out of whack, it can become physical. If any of these bodies are out of whack, it can always become physical. Stress can always become physical. We already said that finances can become physical. We already know that dealing with family and friends, our social environment, that can become physical, right? Our job, right? That can become physical. All of these things can become physical, so that should be a sign, that should be an example that tells you that all of these things are connected. And if you're not nurturing all of these and trying to get yourself to be in unison, and you're only living out of unison, or you're not in sync, with your complete well-being, problems and stress and symptoms can start to come to the surface. Remember, they're not necessarily, the stress and the symptoms aren't necessarily always the problem. They're actually trying to alert you that there's a deeper problem that you're not dealing with. Make sense? Okay? A couple more examples with this. Sometimes people believe that if they're really smart, that they can, that's all they need. If they have high IQ and they can navigate their way through things intellectually, that, they pretty much have one of the most sharp swords, in the world, right? But that's not totally true. And what happens sometimes is, even if you have high IQ, I've seen empirically that people who have high IQs sometimes have very low EQ. They don't even have average EQ. EQ is your emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, right? So if a kid, if there's a girl in school who she's typically a 4.0 student, and then her favorite uncle or aunt passes away, and she goes to school the next day and she's a test, and she fails the test. Meanwhile, she studied for it, she knows everything on the test, and she fails it. It doesn't mean that she's not. It doesn't mean that she's stupid, right? It doesn't mean that she doesn't know what's on the test. It's that she's behaving differently, right? She's not in her well self. She's not well, so she's behaving differently. And with that, you must also keep in mind that tests in general, whether they are academic tests, aptitude tests, whether they are psychometric tests, you can only test for behavior. There's no way to actually test somebody's psychological state. Whenever you take these tests, you're really only able to see how somebody behaves, right? So in that example, even though you might be very smart, right, in certain situations, you may behave in a very stupid way. Maybe that's not the right rhetoric to use, but you may behave in a less intelligent way because one of your other bodies may be being breached or sacrificed, all right? Really want that to make sense. So one more idea that I want to talk about, especially whenever I'm doing work with like my young men and even some of the older men, right? You have to understand that just because somebody has a very, very, very beautiful body, right? And this also goes for anybody, man, woman, whoever. Just because somebody has a physical body that is beautiful to you, you must discontinue, if this is you, you must discontinue the idea that that represents healthiness, right? Excuse me. Just because a woman has a physical body, or just because a man may look, physically appealing to you, that is not a representation of them being healthy overall, All right, really want to stress that idea. Just because somebody looks healthy physically, and this is a very common idea in terms of, we know that somebody who looks healthy physically doesn't mean that they are healthy in their mind. We understand that they might not be healthy with their money, but we don't always talk about that in a very depth-oriented way, right? A lot of high school young men that I work with, they only look at the physical body, and they don't even take into account that they may be dealing with a young lady who is mentally off. She may be emotionally erratic. She may be, spiritually toxic. All of these different things, but you only see that beautiful body, right? That's all you see, but you don't see any of this in terms of the bodies, and you don't see how they look like this. And it goes vice versa, and this transcends race, age, gender, socioeconomic status, all of that, all right? So you must start to look at yourself in this way, and also start to assess other people in this way as well, okay? Very, very, very important, because you don't want to get into situations where you're creating babies with, a physical body that is beautiful, but is really unhealthy in all of these other ways, all right? And we can turn that conversation into work with employees, with coworkers, with hiring people, with sports, with teammates. Well-being applies to every nick and cranny and avenue of life, all right? So for more in-depth discussion, for a more in-depth view and understanding of this, I recommend that you go to PerspectVe.com. That's PerspectVe.com, and pick up the book Unconventional Stress Management and Resilience Coaching. All right. If you pick it up there, it'll be a signed copy, and then that'll be mailed out to you. If you go to Amazon, it's a little bit less, won't be signed, but nonetheless, it's a very, very, very enlightening book, and it goes into more depth about this. Again, the book is called Unconventional Stress Management and Resilience Coaching. All right. I hope this has been enlightening for you. I hope it's been educational and soulful. Okay. So if you have any more questions about this, again, please go pick up the book, and feel free to email me or call me if you have any questions. And remember, expand your perspective. Peace.